I'm Catherine Arndt, the Chief of the VLGA Connect Studio. Welcome to today's episode, brought to you by the VLGA, your councillor support network and the national broadcaster on all things local government.
Hi everyone, it's time for TGU, the weekly governance discussion program from VLGA Connect, brought to you by our sponsors, Hunt and Hunt Lawyers. And to help us unpack another very big week in local government, I have Julie Reid joining us. Hello, Julie.
Hello, and I hope you're both feeling nice and summery and getting ready for the wind down for Christmas, everybody.
Absolutely, it is starting to warm up, isn't it? Tony Browning, you've got your very summery look on there today as well.
Yeah. Oh, I have, but and yes, the wind down to Christmas, Julie, but the news isn't winding down in local government,
No.
isn't it? Is it? It's a big week again.
No, I don't know what's going on, Tony and Chris. I think is everybody, a lot of people tired? Are they getting grumpy? Is it meaning that people's behaviours are maybe not where they should be?
As we were discussing before we started recording, I always thought the last year of a 4-year term was where it got particularly challenging. But some of the behaviours that are starting to play out or have their sequels become clear at the moment are dating back to 2022, 2021, aren't they? So that theory of the fourth year, either that means we've got a really rough year ahead, or that whole thinking goes out the window.
Let's hope the latter.
Yes.
Let us hope, yes, that is the case. So the big one, of course, this week is we've had a council suspended. No surprise, really. We saw this coming. The minister had asked Strathbogie Shire to respond as to why they should not be suspended after a municipal monitors report from Peter Stevenson was received. It should be said, about 3 months ago, the report went to the minister. Finally, this week, after calls even from the mayor of that council for a decision to be made sooner rather than later, the council's been suspended for the rest of the term. As I say, Tony, no great surprise.
Indeed, Chris and Julie, and look, as you say, calls from the mayor at Strathbogie, indeed calls from this very show, I think last week, when we were keen to see the minister act, and that has occurred. An 11-month suspension on the back of this now published, I would describe it as a fairly scathing report by Peter Stevenson, the second monitor. It provides an extensive list of concerns about behaviours at council of councillors in relation to failures to adhere to both the previous monitor Janet Dawes' 10-point, I guess, repair plan for councillor relationships, but then a list of other failures. And as the minister said in her announcement, she saw this as a circuit breaker, something that was needed for the Strathbogie community, and I think it's the right decision.
Tony, are you taking credit for calling last week on TGU for the minister to act? And now
maybe we can take a tiny piece of that, but I think there are a lot of people who are well ahead of us in terms of credit, including, as I say, some of the local councillors themselves. But
no, just on that point, Tony and Julie, I thought that was really interesting. The council responded with a statement with some comments from the CEO, but it linked to the municipal monitors report. But it also linked to individual statements from councillors, which I thought was interesting.
Yeah, that's really unusual to see that kind of individual statement. But I only could assume from that they were so much wanting to put their views forward that they, that it was agreed that they would, release these public statements. I don't know whether it's a good look for the council to have those individual statements put on the website. But look, it is what it is, and you can take from that, what they went through, and there's no doubt that there was significant impact during that time on a number of the councillors. So, and that comes through in their very detailed descriptions of what they experienced in that time. It was interesting, Chris. I felt, I think I was a little disappointed the fact that there was such a clear plan put forward from Janet Dorr, these 10 points, understanding the roles of a councillor, understanding the role of the CEO. These are things that are really, really critical in good governance. And, they obviously just continued on once Janet left in delving into that space that they shouldn't have delved into, trying to get involved in matters that really are the responsibility of the CEO. So very disappointing to see that. I don't know what you thought about the timing of all of this, whether just that 12 months
I was
is
going to ask
something
that.
you expected, because I expected a little bit longer than that.
Yeah.
So I was going to ask
gonna-
that very question. 11 months, effectively, when you compare to Moira Shire this year, 5.5 years through to 2028, and so keen to get your thoughts, both of you, on that. But also, Tony, why is this council suspended and Moira Shire was dismissed?
Yeah. Well, I think more and more we see that Moira decision as a real outlier, I would say, and just perhaps not consistent with other approaches taken. I'd also compare some of the findings in this monitor report to the Commission of Inquiry findings at Moira, and say, perhaps the level of dysfunction at Strathbogie was significantly higher than anything we saw at Moira. But look, I think it's as Julie, I think, is saying, it's quite a short period of time. It's suggesting that potentially some of the serving councillors may well be this, that same existing pool of serving councillors may well be, the pool of candidates we'll see in October of next year. It's for quite a short period of time to look at seeing, a significant, U-turn in the way individuals approach their roles. So I think it's a pretty ambitious time frame. I think it's worth just reflecting on some of the findings of Peter Stevenson's report. That notion of the councillors having maintained that parochial sort of ward focus, rather than, their obligations under the Local Government Act to, consider the diversity of interests of the community. Some interesting observations, I thought, one being on a lack of what the monitor said, Peter Stevenson said, was a lack of understanding of the necessary commitment to fulfill the role of councillor. And he made the point that Section 35 1E of the Local Government Act, which talks about councillors being ceasing to hold office if they're absent from a council meeting for 4 consecutive months, and said more than one councillor at Strathbogie had interpreted that provision to say, well, I can take up to a 4-month break at any period of time,
really,
and that's okay. Similarly, he made negative comments about a councillor indicating, I'm going to be too busy this month to attend briefing sessions. And just one more comment I'd say that just really stays in my mind was this. We often hear about a failure to adequately prepare for council meetings, read council agenda papers, council briefing papers. Well, the monitor observed that these materials were being put into a digital portal, whereby access by councillors to that portal could be, observed and tracked. And it was clear that some councillors were consistently not accessing the portal at all in the lead up to the meeting, and sometimes only during the meeting were they accessing the agenda papers that are to inform them and help them make their decisions. So, that to me was quite concerning. And we just, as I say, now that we're in this more digitized age, it's councillors are a bit more accountable, I think, for their preparation.
That's a really good analysis, Tony, and it underscores, I think, why it's worthwhile carving out some time to read through that report. Julie sort of hinted at that question about the different timing. You've made some comparisons there to the Moira report. One thing, before I come back to Julie, Tony, there's not really anything in this report that's critical of the administration of the council, is there?
No. In fact, on several occasions, I think the Monitor observes that there was, good, appropriate advice coming from the CEO and senior officers that wasn't always respected, taken into account and followed. But you're quite right. Unlike in the Moira Commission of Inquiry situation, there isn't a criticism of the CEO or the executive leadership team that I could identify in this report.
So, Julie, the last line of the report, the council does not have the ability to address the issues raised and function effectively without further ministerial intervention. So the Monitor really is putting it right back at the feet of the elected councillors.
Yeah, absolutely. I was the same as Tony in that I read clearly that it was the responsibility of the councillors, that it wasn't the administration. They can now get on with the job of delivering the services that those community people need, and without interference. And that's effectively what's happened. If there's been interference and there's been a breakdown of those good, safe sort of workplace and good relationships. And so, now they can get on with the job. They can do that at least for the next 12 months. It'll be interesting to see, what happens with the election, who gets back in, whether some of the same councillors get back in if they're going to run.
Well, that goes to the heart of the timing too, doesn't it? Only the 11 months, you'd think it's more likely that if any of those councillors put their hand up, that they may well get elected again.
Yeah, that's right. Although they will have taken a hit in that community. Now, we saw what happened down at South Gippsland. We were worried that some of the problematic councillors were going to get back in. The community said, no, we're not going to accept you back in on council. So let's hope that the community will see through some of the problems, and they might make a different decision.
Yeah.
So we'll have to see how that unfolds. But I think that there's going to be a big job in inducting those councillors when they come back in making sure that they're really, really clear about their role.
So am I making too much of the language here? In this case, the minister has the language all the way through the reports and the announcements is suspended the council, not dismissed. Moira wasn't suspended, was it? It was dismissed for 5.5 years. Is there a nuance here that's important to note, Tony, do you think, in that language?
Look, I do agree with you. There's quite a difference in one's a lot more, seems more pejorative, and more dismissal seems more final. Although effectively, if the council is suspended until the next election, it effectively means that there's no further formal role for these councillors, and unless they are elected in the next election cycle. But interesting choice of language. And again, I think we've made the point, but 11 months doesn't appear to be to equate to the sorts of levels of length of suspension or dismissal periods, however you want to term it, that we've seen at other councils.
There is a difference of dismissal by Parliament and suspension by the minister.
You may be onto something there, Julie.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Because what the minister has done is used her powers that she has within her control without having to go to Parliament.
Right. Okay.
That could be it, I think.
Could be. All right. Thank you, Julie. Now, we do have other stuff to get to, but this is a pretty big story. The other element of this that's getting a little bit of discussion too on the LinkedIn channels, etc., is the Monitor being appointed as the interim administrator for a short period of time with a further appointment to come. We would assume a panel to see through that time, but that remains to be seen. What about this question, though, that some are asking about the person who's actually sat in judgment of the council through that monitor period, then being given the reins? Same thing happened at Moira with, of course, John Tanner off the Commission of Inquiry panel.
Well, I think the argument for would be they obviously intimately understand the nature of the issues and the concerns. But the contra to that would be it's not a sense of an independent person taking into account the monitor report and then seeking to implement that. Look, I think it's a question of availability of individuals, I suspect, and this is an interim appointment, I understand, and there might be an alternative person found.
So you don't accept the argument that some are putting that on the face of it, there's a conflict of interest there?
Well, no, I don't, because the conflict could only be in relation to, relationships with those dismissed councillors, one would think, and they're no longer a factor.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
I think I tend to agree with Tony.
All right, so I'm sure we'll be coming back to this because there'll be more news, obviously, in terms of administrator appointments, etc. But Mr. Stevenson has started work. The suspension took effect on the 6th of December, which was Wednesday, same day the councillors went out of office. Now, while we're talking about administrators, and we've talked about Moira a little bit, John Tanner's appointment there was due to expire today as the administrator and chair administrator. That has now been extended this week by a further 6 months. So John's staying on as the chair and as an administrator through until June next year. The other two administrators, Susanna Sheed and Graham Emerson, have been appointed right through till October 2028, or effectively the first meeting after October 2028 of the new council. So another interesting point to note there in the land of councils under administration. Okay, another big story that's broken just in the last 24 hours is a councillor at Wyndham is set to be suspended for 4 months after a finding of serious misconduct. A Code of Conduct panel report is going before Wyndham City Council on Monday, at which time the suspension will take effect. Have you had a chance, either of you, to read through this one yet?
Yes. Oh, sigh.
Yeah. So
Heavy
Councillor Jasmine
sigh.
Hill.
Heavy
Okay,
sigh.
your first take on it, Tony?
I was going to say it concerns of findings against Councillor Jasmine Hill at Wyndham. They relate to repeated what was found to be repeated incidents of unreasonable behaviour towards council staff, largely to do with telephone communications, but some in-person communications. The evidence that was accepted by the Councillor Conduct Panel, Tom Lynch and Helen Buckingham, was that several incidents of raised voice, yelling, for extended periods by the councillor to different council staff and officers, basically being critical of decisions they'd made or the way they were conducting their role, but communicating that in a completely unreasonable way, screaming and shouting. Councillor Hill, of course, denied that there was any occasions where she screamed and shouted. The panel found that she hadn't shown any remorse. She lacked an understanding of her actions, and felt that because she denied that any of this screaming and shouting had occurred, there was no point telling her that she needed to make an apology. Rather, she would be suspended for that 4-month period, which is a significant period when you consider what's available to a council conduct panel. So I think pretty stark set of circumstances here, and a significant finding against Councillor Jasmine Hill.
And in this case, Tony, there were witnesses, weren't there? So, it was obvious that there's repeated behaviour. And what's important in the definition of bullying, as you know, is this repeated behaviour of, to be able to ensure that it meets the definition. So, so with the witnesses, it's obviously been taken really seriously, and that's the outcome. Just really disappointing. I just feel for the staff in situations like that. It was made quite clear in there that, people have been seriously impacted by that kind of behaviour that has never been experienced by staff in the sector, ever. When, when they're faced with this all of a sudden, how do you cope in a situation like that? It's very, very hard to recover from that kind of treatment. So it's really, really poor form, really, really hard to digest, I suppose, what somebody would go through in that sort of situation. And I feel for them. And look, I think it's good that we're starting to see some of these cases out in the public as well, and that we're starting to understand.
Well, this is another that's taken a while really to play out, Julie. I think some of the allegations go back to 2022. I do note, Tony, this complaint was brought by a fellow councillor in Josh Gilligan, but it was largely about behaviour towards council staff, and it's those staff members, or former, we should note, staff members in some cases, that have brought forward the witness material on which the panel's been able to make its judgment.
Yeah, that's correct. And a point to make there is that some of those staff who are no longer at Wyndham, not all of them, but some of them had left because of this very behaviour.
Yeah.
Other staff made the point that they were, if you like, sticking their necks out, coming forward because, they wanted to make sure that this sort of behaviour was stamped out, that other employees of councils didn't have to face it, and, plaudits to them for being prepared to come forward. And importantly, I think, the panel made a decision about the veracity of the evidence given by both the respondent councillor and those different staff members who came forward and gave statements, and noted that there wasn't in a cross-examination on behalf of the respondent councillor, there wasn't a denial that the conversation occurred, that there was shouting occurring. That didn't take place in the cross-examinations. And I think if you read the decision, you'll see that was quite meaningful for the councillor conduct panel, which ultimately, said, we choose to believe the evidence we heard from these witnesses. There were other allegations. There were 19 allegations. Not all of them, I've got to say, not all of them were accepted. Some were out of time.
Only 6, actually. Yeah, only 6 of those 19.
Right.
Yep, correct. But nonetheless, I think a consistent theme here in terms of the behaviour, and interestingly, there was no order made for the councillor to go and, do some remedial sort of training, but I think that there was something implicit there in terms of suggesting that there was a need for her to reconsider and learn, new ways to deal with these situations. So it'll be interesting to see how that plays out going forward at Wyndham.
And not for the first time, Tony and Julie, the panel determined there was no point asking for an apology because the councillor was denying the behaviour and was not showing any remorse for the behaviour.
Look, I hope out of this, Chris, there comes this courage from staff and from councillors to see that it's important that they call out these behaviours early on. So that's all we can kind of hope for, that we continue to build that kind of culture across the sector.
All right. So that report is going up to Wyndham on Monday, after which time that suspension will take effect. I couldn't help but think, as I'm reading through this and thinking about the process, if this was the state of Queensland, this would not be the end of the matter, because the councillors would have the right to consider the report and make their own determination on whether the sanction should be accepted or not. Thankfully here, the panel's decision is the final decision, isn't it?
Yeah, I think
Could you imagine?
no, I couldn't imagine, and I think we are in a better space.
Yep. All right.
Agree with
So
that.
we'll leave that one there. Another big announcement this week that has sent ripples through 3 councils and the state's major peak body is Ali Wastie's announcement of her new exec team at the City of Greater Geelong. She's managed to secure the services of a current serving council CEO, Anthony Basford at East Gippsland Shire, a current executive director at the MAV in Troy Edwards, a current general manager at Bass Coast Shire, and James Sturton, who was also recently an acting CEO. And there's an internal appointment there as well in Neil Bradley to form the new 4-person executive director team working with her at Greater Geelong. So, as I say, ripples across the sector with this one, Tony.
Oh, look, she's drawn widely, and as she says there, she said, look, she's really pleased. Highly competitive recruitment process, and ultimately 4 very high caliber leaders have been secured for the City of Greater Geelong. And as we know, often as people take on new opportunities, that gives rise to opportunities where they were previously as vacancies open up, and we'll see, as I say, senior vacancies now at Bass Coast and at MAV, and I think perhaps the one appointment that they didn't announce a time frame for was Anthony Basford. Yes. I think so. Yes. I'm not quite sure. I think he's that's currently the CEO, though. He's the former CEO, isn't he, at East Gippsland? Yeah.
No. He's the current CEO.
He's the current CEO.
Yeah, he is. So that's the reason the timing needs to be worked out. Okay. The mayor there at East Gippsland, Tom Cook, confirmed that he'd received Anthony's resignation with great disappointment, but he said the council's well placed to forge ahead, and he said some very nice things about the leadership that Anthony has provided there over a pretty challenging time, pretty much for all council CEOs over the past 4 to 5 years, hasn't it been? So they've wished him well, and they'll say more about a recruitment there. But you're right, Tony, that's why there was no date really yet on Anthony's commencement time, because there's a few things to be sorted out at East Gippsland.
And that'll leave a big gap for East Gippsland. You know, Anthony's got a lot of respect down there from the councillors, and obviously Councillor Crook is the new mayor down there, and he was really excited about getting in there and working with Anthony. So, you know, probably a bit of a blow for East Gippsland, but I'm sure that they will bounce back after a robust recruitment process. Look, you know, well wishes to Anthony and the rest of the team that have been appointed down at Geelong. It's great when you get those big announcements, isn't it? You know, 4 people all at once. And the fact that it has that ripple effect across the sector.
Yes.
Interesting to watch.
It's certainly yes, and certainly a fresh start there at Greater Geelong. Just on Bass Coast, we're expecting, my mail is pretty soon, an announcement on the new CEO there. So we can assume that James wasn't in the mix. I don't know whether he put his hand up for it or not, but that announcement is coming imminently, I'm told. So we've added East Gippsland now to the list of CEO appointments that need to be determined on our handy reckoner on the Roundup website. So we'll stay tuned for that. A couple of councillor notes at Glenelg. Finally, we've got 2 new councillors filling those 2 vacancies that occurred recently. The first, Alistair McDonald, after 4 countbacks, and a few people, as we've talked recently, choosing not to take up the role. Interesting one in the second one, team. Robin McDonald, and there's no relation here, by the way, I'm told. Robin McDonald, who got the second countback result this week, had previously turned down the opportunity to join the council back when Anita Rank finished. But I read some comments in the local press, lots of community support encouraging her this time around to take it up, and she's done so.
I think she said she was too busy last time in I think I offered it in mid 23 and then in November 23. She was heavily involved in a not-for-profit in the Julia Street creative space in Portland. She has a artistic background. She's a retired secondary school art teacher, I believe, born and bred in Portland. So yeah, the law states that each time you have this countback situation, previous candidates who've been offered the role and declined must be re-offered. So
if they remain eligible.
Yeah.
That's great.
So I haven't heard that happening before, but there you go. So hopefully some stability there now for Glenelg as they work their way through to the next elections. Obviously, less than 12 months for these two new councillors, but some pretty significant issues to be dealt with there, including the appointment of a new CEO. So I guess they're probably grappling with the timing of that as well. Well done then to Glenelg at Greater Dandenong, where Eden Foster was elected to state parliament recently at the Mulgrave by-election. There's now been a by-election date set for that position in that ward, and that is the 9th of March. So that's one we'll keep an eye on the first part of the new year. Big stories keep coming. This one, not directly related to local government, but it might have some sort of flow-on effects, or at least some discussion about the alleged politicisation of the public sector. The Ombudsman's report that dropped this week. I've been getting a bit of mail about this too. Some people wanting to know that we'll be discussing this. So I'll just preface that by saying it's not a direct local government related report, but it is an important one in terms of the public sector, isn't it? I know you've read this very closely, Julie.
Yes, well, I've certainly read the summary of it and watched the Ombudsman talk about it this week. And it was really interesting because obviously there's some concerns about in a number of facets. Okay, she talks about the hiring and justification of senior people into roles, particularly after the state election, and particularly targets two departments in that space, and she's questioning some of the processes or lack of processes in that space, and whether or not people are being appointed in that space that are a bit more aligned with the government. She's also criticised things like the suburban rail loop and the Commonwealth Games planning processes, and suggesting that potentially the department staff have not really had much of a say in these processes, and that that's been driven by consultants. And so she has a lot to say about the fact that the the government has relied a lot on consultants in this space, and the departments have sort of missed out in influencing what's going on. And she's saying that, the department staff should be involved in these kind of really critical major projects that are going on. She's saying that that there's a loss of confidence in merit selection. She's saying that there's sort of some, blurred lines within the sector and mixed views, and that there's this concern that maybe staff are not providing advice, frank and fearless advice she talks about, which we know that is a statement that we use both in state government and in local government, about making sure that the advice that we're giving to the ministers, that is honest and truthful, and not in any way, party political spin. And so she's sort of saying, the politicisation of those kinds of pieces of advice is not what she's expecting to see, and she's really concerned about that. So she's put forward some critical ideas for reform. But we've seen in the media this week that the Premier doesn't seem to be overly supportive of the report, which is an interesting position. So I'm not sure where this is going to go. I have my doubts about whether, what is going to be implemented, because she seems to have the view that the culture within the public service is good, and that
Well,
we're not.
you'd have to say that she, if you go on past experience, the government won't do anything about this, because this isn't the first report like this. And it seems that the Premier, Jacinta Allen's sort of taking a leaf out of the former Premier's kind of playbook, which is when these sort of reports come out to say, no, deny, it's not not really happening, and it's not something we're going to do. I think that we're going to deal with. I think that what was telling for me was that reports of, countless public servants who said to the Ombudsman's office, we're not going to go on the record and speaking to you. We're too afraid of the consequences for our careers if we do so, which was telling in itself. So look, whilst there's no findings of corruption, there's clearly a sense that there is a marginalising of the public sector's role in terms of, as you say, Julie, provision of that frank and fearless advice. The suburban rail loop decision was highlighted. The actual relevant secretary of, the Secretary of the Transport and Economic Development Department had no idea about that project until it was announced. It was frozen out, kept in secrecy, developed by consultants. And, I think that this, for a bit of editorial, I'd say this politicisation of that public sector advisory role is a theme that I wouldn't support, and unfortunately, you'd have to say, I don't think many people objectively who could be objective and say that, under this current government, there hasn't been a level of sort of undermining of that independent role of public sector. We've seen that through IBAC reports and through more than one Ombudsman report. And unfortunately, it doesn't appear like there's likely to be action. There's been a call for an independent public sector head to be responsible for, evaluating, recommending, employing department secretaries, dealing with senior executive vacancies in the Victorian public sector. And so that, I think, is the clear recommendation that's either to be adopted, picked up and followed or not. And doesn't seem to be, as you say, Julie, it doesn't seem to be a likelihood that will be picked up at this stage, given the comments from the Premier, but we'll wait and see.
The other thing that the Ombudsman recommended, which was interesting, was this rethinking of cabinet confidentiality.
Yeah.
So, she's saying that the current restrictions limit access to relevant material. So she was obviously frustrated that she wasn't able to access certain material that's cabinet in confidence. So she's recommending a change to enable the Ombudsman to access that cabinet information in the public interest. And I think the other day in the media, she said, well, if the government don't, then hopefully the people will see how important this is and they will make that judgment, So I thought that was an interesting recommendation that I've not seen come out before from the Ombudsman.
So you've both covered it really well. I think just to note a couple of points, this all came about because of a referral from the Legislative Council. So you could argue that it was a bit political in nature anyway, the origins of this. I do note that in her report, she said the investigation found no direct evidence of widespread partisan hiring of the kind suggested in the referral from the Legislative Council, but all of these other issues have come up in the course of undertaking those inquiries. So it's a bit of, I don't want to use the words fishing expedition, but it's a bit of a let's scratch the surface and see what we find. And all these other things have bubbled up. I think you're right that we probably won't see much done about this. The most disappointing thing people are saying to me is that the response from the Premier and the Treasurer to some extent has been completely dismissive. And therefore, there's not much hope that it's really going to go anywhere. But I guess that remains to be seen. All right, it's widely available if you'd like to have a read, and it is a good read. I haven't been through all of it yet, but it's on my list to get back to, that report from Deborah Glass, who is on the way out, it should be said. So she hasn't pulled any punches on the way out the door, has she?
Formidable lady,
No.
Deborah Glass.
Yeah.
All right. What else do we want to talk about this week? There's quite a bit happening. I'll just pick a few from the list. The Lord Mayor of Hobart is in a bit of conduct bother. She's been cautioned by a code of conduct panel down there in Tasmania over an incident that occurred after a public meeting with a resident who is now a councillor. Interesting observation that. There was a grabbing of the arm and some verbal accostement is the way it's been described, accusing the person of lying. This was all over a plan for the University of Tasmania to move its campus into the CBD of Hobart. The panel found that Anna Reynolds' behaviour had brought her office into disrepute, but that a caution was the most appropriate sanction here, Tony.
Yeah, that's right. So the other person in question, then a private citizen, now a councillor, Louise Elliott, had spoken at this, as you say, event to discuss, University of Tasmania's plans to relocate. The mayor took issue with some of the language in Ms. Elliott's presentation speech, and the code of conduct panels found that the mayor hadn't treated Ms. Elliott fairly. She'd caused offence to Ms. Elliott, embarrassment, brought the council and the role of mayor into disrepute, but also took note that shortly after the incident in question, the mayor had issued a public apology, which had not been accepted by Ms. Elliott. But so the sanction is a caution, and I think that the public apology was quite meaningful, I think, for the council of conduct panel in terms of not imposing a greater sanction upon the mayor of the Lord Mayor, I should say, of Hobart.
So that's a conduct matter in Tasmania. Take your pick. Just put a pin in the map and you'll find a conduct issue somewhere at the moment. Another one that caught my eye, Julie, was in New Zealand, where a councillor was heard over a live microphone in a council meeting that had been going for 7 hours, mind you, making some derogatory remarks. They were of a sexist or a sexual nature, I understand, about the mayor of another city, the mayor of the city of Wellington, Tori Whānau, who recently admitted to having an alcohol problem that she was seeking help for. This councillor at Auckland has attracted quite a bit of criticism for this behaviour.
And I don't think he's realised that he's been heard.
No.
He's been,
a hot mic,
into the
Julie.
meeting.
Yes.
The mic's still on and he's in the background making these comments. Oh my goodness. But anyway, and it's been caught out. And so, serious sort of comments back on his behaviour that have come through in the media. And the council have now taken action to block that out of the minutes of that particular meeting, which is good. I know the media have been trying to get a hold of, the comments that were made, but the council are refusing to release that, which is a good thing. But there's a message in all of this for councillors, one, you shouldn't be saying it anyway, and two, be careful if your microphone's on or off about what is said.
Julie, there's so many incidents of these hot mic issues, and one that as soon as I heard this, I just remember. Do you remember the former president of France, Jacques Chirac?
Oh yes,
Jacques Chirac was at a gathering of world leaders back in the 2000s, and he's talking on a hot mic to Vladimir Putin from Russia and Gerhard Schroeder from Germany about the the two bids for the Olympics, Paris and London. And he says on the hot mic about Britain, you just can't trust people who have such bad cuisine. I think that's the best hot mic comment. I think he said their contribution to cuisine was mad cow disease or something.
Oh my goodness.
no.
Yeah, just beautifully caught on the hot mic in the mid 2000s, and a good reminder to people like ourselves and anyone else.
Always treat the microphone as live. Yeah.
Always treated as live.
I know.
Exactly.
And look, honestly, there's nothing wrong with pork pies. Really? Come on.
Beg to differ, but anyway.
The city of Canada Bay is back in the news this week, where that mayor, Angelo Sarikas, was suspended recently after a finding of serious corrupt conduct by ICAC. He's currently suspended by the local government minister, Ron Honig, who's yet to make a final determination. The councillor moved a motion calling for him to resign in the interests of the council and the community. That was voted down by other councillors. It led to an eruption of jeers and insults from the public gallery. One person was ejected. An amended motion eventually got up calling on the minister to expedite his decision. But Canada Bay and that issue with Angela Sarikas still bubbling away. All right, we'll just note that one as another development that's occurred this week. There's a council in Canada that's had its councillors and senior executives removed by the municipal minister there. That's the city of Chestermere. They've been under investigation for some time and have been accused of not cooperating with that investigation. Interesting one here, team, where the minister has the power to remove some councillors and protect others. And he said there were 3 councillors that had actually been working towards more accountability that didn't deserve to be dismissed.
And is that right? They also can remove the staff. So
well, the senior executives have been removed, yes.
The power to do that as well, which is interesting.
It is.
And I think with the foreshadowed conduct reforms in Victoria, it seems that there may be that power to more sort of selectively dismiss or suspend, for the minister.
Individual councillors.
Individual councillors.
Yes.
Which seems to be sort of taking some of that experience in other states and applying it in Victoria.
Minister Horn did speak to that specifically at the VLGA's Fast Track Day as one of those things that she felt was needed to avoid some of these instances we've seen in the past of entire councils being dismissed, when perhaps you could shoot back the cause of the issue to 1 or 2 or so of the individual councillors.
Yeah.
So I'm glad you mentioned that, Tony, because we remind people we'll be going into recess for a little while, but that legislation is due to come out for consultation in February, so it won't be long before we see that, and then I think there'll be a fairly quick period of time where the sector will be invited to respond, because I think March is the intended target date for introducing that legislation. Okay, all over the place here. Julie and Tony, you've added a few things to the list today. Julie, you wanted to comment on a nice piece that reflects on the contribution of Craig Neiman at Greater Bendigo as CEO for a long time.
Yeah, that's right. There was a nice piece in the Bendigo Advertiser this week recognising Craig's amazing contribution to Greater Dandenong. It was interesting that he's saying, he's quoted in this article saying that he kind of fell into the job, years ago. But, so almost 4 decades later, Mr. Newman has a resume which includes top jobs as the chief executive at Loddon Shire and also the city of Greater Bendigo. So, from being raised on a dairy farm and coming up through the ranks and getting into those kind of jobs is an amazing success story for Craig. He says that he stayed in local government because he's really enjoyed the opportunity to try and make a difference in the community. And certainly staying local. So a nice story, and obviously that's resonates with a lot of people that work in local government. They want to make a difference at that local level, and he's obviously got the passion to work and improve things locally. And there's a bit of pride there in seeing Bendigo grow over that period of time that he was there. So I believe he was there from 2007 through to obviously this year.
Yeah.
So, yeah, look, lots of achievements during that time. I think that his reflection was, he really enjoyed building a strong organisational culture of good values and behaviours, which is a nice way to step out, knowing that he's proud of, what he's achieved with the organisation in that time, as well as the amazing amounts of projects that have been delivered out in the community. So I believe that Andrew Cooney is taking over on the 15th of December, so very soon. And we will all miss Craig, but it sounds like he's not going to retire completely. Chris, did you read that into it, that maybe he might still want to dabble in a few things and
I'm sure. I'm
might
sure.
not retire so much, but I know he's looking forward to spending some more time with his family. So
I'm sure he'll still be around and connected. Julie and Tony, one of the names that keeps popping up as I interview the new crop of leaders for VLGA Connect local leaders, particularly some of the newest CEOs, but some of the mayors as well, have mentioned Craig as one of the influencers, one of the mentors over a number of years. So that legacy goes beyond just the Greater Bendigo organisation, and I suspect, given that sort of history, that might be a space you continue to see him play in.
Yeah, I agree. I've certainly heard that comment back many times about Craig. Must be something about growing up on a dairy farm, all those early morning starts that got him well organised.
Never made that connection, Tony, but that's an interesting theory.
I think it'd make you resilient, wouldn't it? Resilient and organised, maybe? Resilient? Yeah.
There's a few ex-farmers around the sector now that you mention that. And Tony, you've spotted a bin worker getting some attention.
I did.
In Queensland.
I did, and look, I've got look. We might have today had to necessarily dwell on some perhaps some negative behaviours across the sector, but here's a great, I think, positive story about councils' impact on people's daily lives, and wow, just listen to this one. The use of social media to praise council and council employees is what's happened up at Moreton Bay Council.
If I didn't see it with my own eyes, I wouldn't believe it.
Yeah, spontaneous, not organised by the council. This is a Facebook story that's come out where it's about a particular individual in the garbage collection team at Moreton Bay Council. Comments like, a shout out to this amazing bloke. He's legendary. What's he done? Well, residents are complimenting him on social media because when they've forgotten to put their bins out, this particular employee has noticed and gone behind the gate, brought the bins out, emptied them. Guess what, Chris and Julie? He even picks up the bins when he knocks them over once they're emptied. So he's a bit of a local hero. I don't know his name, but he's been called out and he's in the media up there at Moreton Bay Council in Brisbane. And yeah, just a good reminder that, there are there's a vast majority of people working in the sector who are making a real difference to people's lives, and it's great to just see this kind of spontaneous appreciation expressed.
That's fantastic.
I agree. The spontaneous appreciation is terrific. There is more to the story, though. When you dig deep into it, this is in the city of Moreton Bay, and I think it makes the story better. The council actually offers a service to people who don't perhaps have the ability, mobility-wise, to take their bins out. And I think in this case, that person is on a list of people who receive that extra assistance because of the challenges that they have. I think that's an even better story. Great to see that people have noticed that he's doing that, but to learn that it's actually part of a concerted council effort to help people who perhaps need the assistance, I think is terrific.
Oh,
fabulous.
That's just like customer service gold, isn't it?
It is. Yeah. So well done. That's
the
city of Moreton Bay. And we had the CEO of that council on a VLGA panel recently. Really nice fellow and knows his stuff. So kudos to the team up there. Good pickup, Tony. All right, we've covered a lot of ground. I know Julie has to get off to some other commitments, so we're going to have to wrap this episode up. But I think we've covered what we needed to. Any final thoughts, guys?
Oh, look, just it's been an interesting week, and I think it's nice to finish on a positive story because, you know, as I said, people are getting tired towards the end of the year. Let's hope that everybody's going to take a decent break and come back a bit happier and control some of these behaviours, and that we can work really well in this final year of this term, because this is going to be the difficult year of the 4 years. So brace yourselves and get ready to be prepared to work better together, I think.
I think you're having a bet each way there, Julie.
I am.
Tony, any final thoughts from you this week?
Well, we'll be back for our final episode next week, won't we, Chris and Julie? So that will be exciting, the Christmassy episode, and final one. Be a little bit of a break for us and viewers. We'll be back in full force in 2024. But wait for it next week.
Well, I just wonder whether we'll have anything
each other every week.
I just wonder whether we'll have anything to talk about next week. Surely all the big stuff's done now.
I hope so. Well, maybe it can just be just a coffee chat.
Okay, you're right.
Julie and I can open our Christmas present from you live on the show, Chris.
Note to self there. Okay, all right. So I think this has reached its natural conclusion. Thank you to you both. Thank you to Hunt & Hunt Lawyers for sponsoring TGU. Thank you to you, the viewers and listeners of VLGA Connect, for sticking with us. And hopefully you'll come back one more time for 2023 for our final episode next week. Until then, have a great week and bye for now.